Welcome to LONESTARP3 Live. I'm Kate Greer, longtime champion and supporter of LONESTARP3 and strategic communications consultant. With me today are two leaders from the Charles Butt Foundation. We'll spend the next hour together exploring the Texas teacher workforce, particularly insights found by public opinion polling done by the Charles Butt Foundation. I've got a set of questions to get us started, but if you have questions, please submit them in the chat, and we'll get to as many as we can later in today's conversation. Let's begin by learning a little bit more about our guests today. So Thea and Kendra, can you introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about your background and the work that you do at the foundation? Thea, we can start with you.
Great, thanks Kate, thanks for having us. Yeah, I really come to this work from a place of understanding what it's like to be a teacher and not feel like you're very prepared. So the work we do at the foundation is really near and dear to my heart. I became a 4th grade teacher through an alternative certification program. I had totally different plans for what I thought I was going to be and really made that decision toward the end of my college experience. And so that's really informed kind of all of my work in this space, and especially the work that I get to do at the Charles Butt Foundation. The foundation is one of several ways that Charles Butt kind of expresses his support and appreciation for public schools. So that is really our mission, vision, supporting all of our 5.5 million students in Texas public schools. And we really take a lens of thinking about how do we support teachers to be those supports for the students? So we really focus in on teachers. And we have kind of 3 main ways that we do that work. You'll hear a lot from Kendra about what L&I does, all their incredible work in polling and research. They're also an incredibly helpful thing to have internally to help us with all of our internal evaluations. So we'll talk a lot about that work today. In addition, we also do a lot of storytelling. So really trying to share with the public the incredible stories that can be found in public schools here in the States, and hearing both from those who are kind of directly impacted in the schools, our students, our teachers, our principals, but then we've also got a whole series trying to understand kind of more holistically the impact that teachers and public schools have on folks who are now in positions of prominence, who have gone on and done incredible things in their life, sharing back their stories. We call that Voices on Teaching. And then what I get to do at the foundation is support our programs team. So we run a number of statewide programs. In the past, we've kind of had a broader focus. We've done work on principal preparation. We've supported over 1,500 principals in the past, done a lot of work around blended learning and around personalized learning. But now we're really, and for the past couple of years, have really been honing in on supporting teachers, especially working in teacher preparation. So we work with 28 different university-based teacher prep programs across the state, and we've supported right around 1,000 students with a scholarship for students who are planning to become public school teachers in Title I schools or in priority subject areas for the state. So really our work revolves around how can we support public school students, and we know that really a key lever for us is public school teachers.
Absolutely, and I imagine that there's a story there around, like, you were going to college for one thing, but then wanted to become a teacher, and that's such a timely conversation for today's discussion. Also with us today is Kendra Montejos Edwards. Kendra, let us know about you. What is L&I? Maybe we can start there and then tell us about yourself.
Yeah, I am a senior research associate at the foundation. I work with our learning and impact team, so we tend to be the research arm of the foundation, where we get to explore research questions to really elevate and support all the good work that the state is going to do and wanting to do to support our Texas public school teachers, as well as our foundation. So we will talk about our polling today, and specifically our Texas teacher poll, and then kind of give some glimpse into some of those data points. But yeah, I'm excited to be here to talk about the research. A little bit about me. I am first generation college student, so that's kind of what drives my passion for education. Growing up as an immigrant student here in our K-12 public schools here in the US, that kind of drives my passion and my interest for education, to really help and support our students and our teachers.
Awesome. Well, let's jump in and maybe just start with a grounding in scale. Texas educates 1 in 10 kids across the country, and we actually are home to more teachers than any other state. So there's a lot at stake here. Kendra, do you want to give us a sense of maybe who our teachers are in Texas and how does that compare to teachers across the country?
Yeah, as you both kind of mentioned earlier, we have 5.5 million students in our Texas public schools. And so who are those who are teaching those students, which is almost 400,000 Texas public school teachers. So I think the number's around 320,000 Texas public school teachers, right? So I think that is important for us to know as a foundation, as a team, to understand who those teachers are. The demographics of our teachers, I want to say in the state of Texas, we have one of the most racially and ethnically diverse teacher populations in the state. At the same time, it doesn't match the demographics of our students. So again, something to note as we are grounding our work, as we're thinking about programmatic efforts as well. Another interesting fact that I know many partners with LONESTARP3 know, as well as we know, is our number of uncertified teachers in the state being, I think 56% of our newly hired teachers are uncertified teachers. And so that's something for us to know as we think about how do we support and innovate our teacher preparation pathways for our teachers here in the state of Texas. So I think that's a quick grounding on who our teachers are.
Yeah, I think the teaching demographic has changed, but also the certification or preparation has changed significantly over the past several years. And teachers, as you guys both mentioned, are kind of the undercurrent of the work that the foundation does. Thea, why is that so important to the work of the foundation? Why do you choose to spotlight teachers so prominently? And what should listeners know about the foundation's work more generally, beyond what you shared up front?
Yeah, I think research tells us that teachers are really where we should be looking to when we're trying to impact public school students. Teachers are the #1 in-school factor that affects student achievement. We also know, as Kendra alluded to, the incredible importance and value for all kinds of students of having a diverse teacher workforce. And so we really start from that, right? The research tells us this is important. All of our experiences tell us this is important. We can all name those incredible teachers we had that have shaped our lives. And so I think we come at it from the kind of research, from the anecdote. We know that teachers really are the place to focus in on, and also a place to focus in on a group that needs a lot of support. There's a lot of ways we can support, both as they are coming to the classroom and then once they're in the classroom. And I think, as Kendra mentioned, the high number of uncertified teachers we have really kind of underscores that need for a lot of different types of support. And I know we'll be talking more about that today. I think we also at the foundation really come from a stance of being user-centered. Who are these systems made to support? And for us, we know kind of top of mind is students. Our public school system is made for students, but kind of the layer right below is teachers. And how do we help teachers thrive within this system so that they can support their students? So we really focus on hearing their voices directly, understanding directly from research, from them, kind of what are those key things we can do to help make this system achieve results that we want and not necessarily the results that it is achieving right now.
Yeah, how do you strive for improvement? How do you make sure that we're supporting but also fixing systems where there are gaps? Y'all have a really strong feedback loop at the Charles Butt Foundation through your public opinion polling. And I think that that offers a lot of qualitative and quantitative data for what Texas teachers are thinking, feeling, reflecting on. I wonder if you can talk about a little bit why you chose the route of public opinion polling, and then we'll get into what the poll actually looks at. But why is that a strategy that the foundation chose to pursue?
Yeah, and I can speak to why we decided to do the teacher poll, but it actually started with our Texas education poll. So the first poll that we launched was the Texas education poll, which looks into the perspectives and experiences of Texans with Texas public schools. And even within that, we looked at the experiences of parents and non-parents. So we defined parents as individuals who have a child currently enrolled in a Texas public school, and non-parents, those to be Texans who don't have a child currently enrolled in Texas public schools. And the reasoning for that poll was to have the data and the research to support advocacy, to support those who are pushing for little p and big policy that are impacting our Texas teachers. As we were doing that poll, we realized, well, we need to actually talk to the experts of the classrooms, right? Who are the experts of the classrooms? Well, teachers. And so that's why in that same year in 2020, we also launched the Texas Teacher Poll to understand their experiences in the classroom every day. And so since then, we have conducted both polls at the same time, the Texas Education Poll and the Teacher Poll at the same time. And so both kind of speak to each other, but they're also different because we understand the perspectives of Texans, but then we also understand the perspectives of teachers.
Yeah, that's helpful. I want to get a little bit deeper into the teacher poll
Yeah.
specifically. I would love to know who is represented from a polling methodology standpoint. We have a lot of researchers that like to listen and understand. So what do we know about who is responding? And then oftentimes I think about maybe who is not responding, or what don't we know about who is responding? Like, what is the information that you have from a methodology standpoint?
Yes, so within the teacher poll and both polls, we partner with Langer Research Associates to conduct these polls. And so they help us design the survey, they help us with the random sampling of our Texas teachers. And so we talked earlier about the number of Texas teachers that we have in the state. We can say with confidence we have a representative sample of Texas teachers. In the 2024 poll, we had 1,014 teachers in the state of Texas. Something that over the years we've pushed and really advocated for in the poll is to have an oversample of various subpopulations, because if we want to disaggregate the data by region or specific demographic, then we want to make sure we're oversampling. At the same time, you touched on the limitations of polling, and so there are some subpopulations that we can't get significant statistics for or data, and so that will always be a limitation, and I hope that in the future we can partner more with LONESTARP3 partners or researchers across the state to really dig more into those demographics. But we can say with confidence that our poll is a representative sample, and the only poll in the state of Texas that has a representative sample of Texas public school teachers.
I think one thing I would appreciate just to add to that is the times, this has not happened with the teacher poll, but there's been times when we couldn't get quite the exact sample we wanted in our Texans poll. And so in those cases, the team has gone and said, okay, we didn't get the people we wanted, so let's do a focus group. Let's still try to find ways to gather that rich data. And so really appreciate that we have gotten to this point where we can say it's representative, but also the times that we have seen the need to go out and conduct more research, we have.
Yeah, and I think about Texas and the diversity of our schools, right? There are school systems where you have a couple of teachers and 8 kids, right? And then there are school systems where you have tens of thousands of teachers and 150,000 kids, right? And so there's a lot there that I imagine the teacher poll offers a firm foundation, and knowing kind of the research arm, there's always more, or I wonder what, or how is this resonating with folks. I know the 2025 poll is in the field right now, so we won't be unveiling any big data from that. But we have talked before about the themes and big takeaways from previous polls, so wonder if one of you wants to kind of take a stab at walking us through what some of those highlights are, and maybe some trends that you've seen through the years, right? What trends are holding steady, and where have you maybe seen some shifts?
Yeah, I can talk through some of the key findings, and some of the top 3 key findings that I'll mention are teacher pay, teacher attrition, feeling sense of value, and then I'm going to add in a little bit about teacher preparation, because that's an area that we want to dig in more, but a key finding that we want to highlight. So with teacher pay, in our 2024 poll, we found that 77% of Texas public school teachers do not feel they are paid a living wage, and that is something that we have looked at within the 5 years of polling. And so in 2024, that was the finding. When we looked at by region, we disaggregated it by region. The medium range was from 55,000 to 65,000. In previous polling, I want to say in 2022, 2023, we asked teachers questions about, do you take on a second to third job? And we found that predominantly a lot of teachers did take on a second to third job to make ends meet. So again, painting this picture and understanding of the importance of supporting teacher pay. The other one is teacher attrition. So then we also looked and asked teachers, are they seriously considering leaving the classroom? And 78% of our teachers said that they were seriously considering leaving the classroom. This matches with TEA data on attrition. So while we ask them, are you seriously considering, we know they're following through on that because of the data that TEA has on teacher attrition. We also asked teachers, who do you feel a great deal or a good amount of value from? So that sense of value. And to us, this was interesting that predominantly teachers, around 80%, said their fellow teachers, so other teachers in the classroom. So it kind of speaks to that camaraderie that teachers have, that they feel the most sense of value from other teachers at the school. They also spoke and said about 68% of teachers said their school admin, they feel a great deal or good amount of value from their school admin, which rose from previous years. So that trend was one where it was, I think, started at 68%, dropped to 50-something%, then went back up to 68%. So that's a trend that we're watching, right? So the first they said other teachers, then school administrators. So that's something that I think is of interest to us to look at. And then teacher preparation. We asked teachers, what factors do you consider important when selecting a teacher preparation program? And so over 80% of teachers said factors such as cost, time to complete the program, is it accredited by a university or a college? So that's an area I think where we want to know. We asked that question in 2024, but in 2025 we're digging a little deeper into teacher preparation.
Yeah, I want to dig into that just a little bit because I have 2 kids in public schools up in Dallas and one that will be there in the fall. And I've seen, we have a wonderful school, but the level of preparedness or the level of confidence coming from different teachers who have entered from different pathways is notable, right? Even for friends of mine who are parents and are just like, wait a second, this teacher is brand new, and it's, they look overwhelmed sometimes. And we have talked as parents, like, how do you support those teachers in getting up to where they need to be? And so the thought of course, a teacher or a teacher candidate looking at cost, looking at time to completion, those are the natural drivers, right? But I would be really interested in, like, how do you democratize better sense to what does it look like to really be prepared, knowing that sometimes the cheapest and fastest way into a classroom doesn't necessarily yield the most prepared teacher from themselves or the biggest impact on student outcomes. So I love that you guys are looking into that a little bit. I want to follow up on the bright spot you mentioned around administrative support and feeling valued by administrators. I was looking through the 2024 poll and saw that dip and that rebound, and I wonder what went into that. Like, how do you, I think that's probably the qualitative piece of this, and so whether it's a focus group or just some theories that the Vet Foundation has thought through, I wonder if y'all have anything to add there that might be a scalable solution across the state so that either more administrators can help their teachers feel valued, or maybe there are some themes there that we could expand to the other populations where teachers may not be feeling so valued.
I think one thing that's really interesting and was just like one of those fortuitous things that happened is that we closed our first round of responses for the first poll like the week before COVID hit and all the schools had to shut down. So we've really gotten to see the wave of like COVID and this and up. And so it's been really just kind of, it's not a speculation, but just like a very natural and interesting experiment that has happened. But I do think, we see so clearly that the closer a person is to the school, the more they appreciate their teachers. I think that really is kind of the work of what we're trying to do around storytelling and marketing is like, if not everyone is going to be in a school, how can we put what's happening in school in front of them? And so I really think that these concentric circles are important, right? Teachers value each other, teachers are perceiving them to value them more, which is great, but how do we build those concentric circles and kind of push them in a little bit more so that even those who may not get to step into a school building every day still understand what's happening?
I like that.
There's an interesting data point too, because we asked teachers about the support they received from their school administrators, and a little over 40% said that their school admin advocated for them, so the teachers, when interacting with parents. And I think that's, so that's interesting where they had the school admin advocate for them in those parent interactions. As mentioned earlier, we do have the polling, but within the polling we have open-ended questions as well, so we can have some a little more qualitative data. And in one of the questions we asked, in one of the open-ended questions, we asked teachers what factors are encouraging you to stay in the profession. And I'll add here that that's a question we've asked over all the years of polling, but within the last year, we added besides your students, right? Like besides your students, what is
Gotta
encouraging?
set that aside.
Yeah, because when you ask them that question, they always say their students, right? Because they're passionate, really dedicated teachers. So we said, besides your students, what else is encouraging you to stay in the teaching profession? So through qualitative coding and analysis, one of the themes that popped up there were administrators. And so it came up both in the polling and the quant findings and in those qualitative findings as
And if
well.
I remember correctly, even though we said set aside relationships with students, we still had a bunch of responses that were relationships with
Like,
students.
I don't
which
care.
think is, like, yeah, like, I want to tell you really what it is, but I do think this is a great area for us to continue to think about is what are like some tangible things that administrators can do for teachers to feel that value.
Yeah, and I think that makes sense to folks who even aren't teachers or have never been teachers, because you often want to work for a good boss, you know? And so when you think about the role of administration and supporting and doing real coaching and providing feedback and helping you reach some goals, like, I think that makes all the sense in the world. I imagine that there are questions that you have that we still don't know the answers to. You teased on this a little bit, but how might future polls or maybe other research approaches give us more insights based on the questions that sometimes public opinion polling tease out for us?
Yeah, and you were getting at a little bit about this, about teacher preparation earlier and understanding how we can better support our teachers. I'm also a parent too, so I'm very aware of kind of the experience that as parents we see our teachers who are educating our children. So this also hits really close to home as well. But an area that we want to explore more is to understand better our teacher preparation pathways. And so while in the 2024 poll, we asked some of those general questions, in our 2025 poll, we're asking of those who went through a teacher preparation program, what in that program supported you or did you find useful in your first year as a teacher? We're also wanting to, if sampling allows, we talked about the limitation of polling and sampling, but if sampling allows, to understand based on pathway that teacher experience, right? So those who maybe went through a residency model or those who went through a traditional preparation program or an alternate program, what is that experience of a teacher in the classroom? So those are wonderings for us. Will we be able to answer it all? I don't know, but that's an area we as a foundation are committed to wanting to understand, as well as, and we talked about this earlier, understanding attrition and also creating a positive work culture and environment for teachers to have tangible data and recommendations for those who are impacting those policies at the school campus level and then also statewide.
You teased out working conditions a little bit. Thea, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think I would add that yes, I do think it's really important for us to learn kind of more specifically what these working conditions are. I think on the teacher prep front, as you said, I think it's really interesting now that we are seeing this group of uncertified teachers to understand more about them and what brought them into the classroom. I mean, in some ways, these are people to be incredibly admired who saw an opening, saw a place where they could make a difference. And so I'm really interested to learn more about what drew them to the field in addition to what keeps current teachers there. And, you know, we as Kendra mentioned, we've started asking not just what are the forces pushing you out of the field, but what are the forces that are keeping you in? And I think asking that question of more folks and seeing if there's differences based on pathway, if there's differences based on life circumstance, will just help us get a better view of like how do we bump up the good things in a way that really works for different teachers and doesn't have to be one size fits all.
Yeah, before we leave the concept of teacher preparation or the topic of teacher prep, Thea, you mentioned in your intro you were an alternatively certified teacher. I wonder if there were skills that you wish you had gained more of before entering the class.
Every skill is probably the real answer. I mean, I think one thing is certainly like just not knowing what it meant to be a teacher, right? I had not been in a school since I left high school, right? And it's a very different thing. And I think the more opportunities we have to have clinical experiences before someone becomes a teacher of record is incredibly key. So I think we know that, you know, the opportunity to go through a program, through a residency, through an apprenticeship that really gives you that deep clinical foundation is incredibly important. And I think if I could have had anything, that would be like the number one thing I would have had. I also, you know, we get to work with so many incredible teacher preparation faculty, and they're talking about all these incredible teaching theories and all these books, and I'm just like, sometimes I get starstruck. I'm like, wow, I wish I had the opportunity to have all of that before I stepped into the classroom, so I could have both kind of the theoretical frameworks and the practical knowledge. And it's going to be really interesting thinking about how we get those important skills and knowledge to folks who are in the classroom now. Like, when I was in the classroom, what could have been done to still get me all that good stuff that I really needed? And I think that's really kind of the question for the state right now. We've got all these folks who rose their hands, said, I would like to be a teacher. They're in the classroom, like, okay, now what? How do we support them so that they can really be successful?
Yeah, so if you didn't have practice-based experience before entering the classroom, it doesn't mean that like we should wash our hands and say, figure it out now. Like, what is that real-time coaching and support? We do have a question in the chat, so I want to just highlight this. The question is, as we talk about teacher prep pathways, have your polls surfaced any insights about the impact of different paths? Grow your own, residencies, alternative certification, or traditional?
That's a great question, and that's where we're hoping to dig in more for 2025. We have some questions that are tailored that have that breakdown, and so that is to come, hopefully in the fall. So stay tuned, and September, October, when we decide to release in the fall, we will have that information out. But that is a question that we are thinking about as a foundation, and of course, we would love to contribute to that.
I think it's been really like a fun thing that our teams get to do together is, we all have questions, we get to give you all the questions, you ask the questions, and we get the information back. And so I am also really looking forward to that as we think about how we make sure that there's a high quality pathway no matter how someone comes to the classroom.
Yeah. Kendra, you spoke to issues around attrition and just the general sentiment for teachers in the field. You have a lot of feedback coming from the field. What is the ideal scenario for how districts or researchers or others should use the data coming out of the foundation to inform retention and recruitment specifically?
Yeah, I think and we can kind of tag team this a little bit, but we would love for individuals to utilize the data to support any conversations or arguments. We know as an LNI team, as a learning and impact team, how individuals have used the data to support conversations, policy decisions at the campus level, at the university level, at the state level. And so it's understanding how does the data resonate within their context, right? We understand that the data can be general for the state, but if it resonates with, or does it not resonate with their specific campus level? And I think that's how we want people to interact with the data.
Yeah, I think we often, we get the data too, and we're so excited, and then we're like, can you slice it by this little tiny segment? And the answer is often no. And so I do think really encourage folks to take a look at those questions, see what the state is saying, but then go ask them in your context, in your backyard, with your teachers. Does it match? Does it not match? I think it's a really great way to open conversations. It certainly is not every answer to every question, but should be used as a way to kind of start those conversations, start figuring out, okay, but what does this look like for us here locally? And I also think that kind of way of using this poll really highlights something we talk about a lot, which is there's so many different reasons to do research, right? We might be doing research for accountability, we might be doing public opinion research, but I think we often don't think enough about kind of research for improvement. And we don't always need to do a full-blown Langer study. We could just ask 10 teacher candidates. We could ask 15 teachers, and we would get that kind of actionable feedback. And so I hope that this can kind of be the base then to feed into some of that kind of more local research that folks can do.
Yeah, you're so right in that, like, sometimes research can sound very formal, or advocacy can sound very formal, or oh my gosh, I'm not trained in this or anything. But often when you peel that back a little bit, it's like, okay, I am curious about this, right? And thinking about the trends from the poll and your concentric circle analogy, there's a lot to be done at the local level, even on a school campus level, right? So I think about my incredible principal, Katie Lewis from Dallas, and just the amount of feedback that she gets from her teaching staff, from her community, and how she synthesizes it to build a strong ecosystem. And she is still relatively new to the campus, but her impact there has been tremendous, right? Because she has chosen to ask a question and then ask another one and build a concept around that. she is like one story and I adore her, but I imagine that you guys have a number of anecdotes from how the poll has maybe prompted those additional questions or something like that. I would love to hear maybe a story of action or change that's come as a result of the public opinion polling.
Yeah, I'll add that when we asked individuals how they were interacting and utilizing our data and our research, like I mentioned earlier, we realized and we learned that it's been used at the various levels, at the district level, at the university level, at the statewide kind of advocacy level. And so we know that the data has been used to push conversations, to push decisions. At the university level, we've heard everything from faculty using the data to innovate their programs and improve their teacher preparation programs. We've also heard that the data has been used in the classroom when teaching future teachers, just to kind of set the level, so that teachers know what they're expecting when they enter the classroom. And then in the advocacy level, individuals using the work to really push policy forward. So there's it's great for us as a team to know that it's being used in a variety of ways. And then people are interacting with it.
I think we blow up their Slack because we get so excited to see our research in the wild, which I'm sure a lot of folks on the Zoom can also relate to that. But every time we see, like, Kendra, we saw it, somebody used it. It's
we love
so
when
exciting.
we get those screenshots. You're like, oh, they used our visual
Yeah.
in a presentation or something.
Yeah, making it accessible.
Yeah.
Districts are an obvious place to look for action and change, but all of us working in this space, including the Charles Butt Foundation, can continue to be better attuned to teacher voice. You guys have touched on this a little bit today, but I wonder, you've done this poll for a number of years, the foundation has been around for a while. How's the foundation thinking about evolving to meet the needs of Texas teachers, particularly since they look different today than they did even just a few years ago?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've started touching on this a little bit, but I really thinking about multiple pathways to the classroom, and I think we're in a really great moment because I think that's actually where a lot of folks across the state, including our big P policy makers, are coming to, is how do we provide really high quality pathways no matter how someone chooses to become a teacher. And so I think that's really where we're thinking, and we have always had this idea in education of differentiation for students, and now I think it's time to start thinking about, okay, what does differentiation look like for teachers in their preparation as well? It's been a lot of great research out of Texas Tech about what experiences a new teacher might bring in that make them more likely to be a successful teacher. And I think it's really time we all start, we kind of pay attention to that. So we are thinking about, we've got for example, a project with the Houston Endowment where we are supporting students who are starting at community college and then going to finish at a four-year university, right? A high quality pathway. They're doing residencies once they get into the university, but it's also accessible because you're at 2 years at a community college, which is less expensive. And so just really thinking about, like, quality can be found in a lot of places, and how do we bolster that and incentivize folks, as you said, to choose those high quality options, which I think is both through, as you alluded to, knowing what high quality means and looks like, right? Like, when you have a decision to make and there's so many choices, it's easy to just pick, okay, quick and cheap. And really, how do we tell the public in the long run that is nor in your best interest necessarily, nor in the best interest of the students that you're coming in to serve? So I think we're thinking a lot about that. How do we build those pathways, and then how do we draw people to them?
Yeah, it's a poor analogy, but it's a little bit like it's easier to do fast food every night, but like the long-term ramifications may not be there as well.
Yeah, and I'll add to that, we're on the research side, we are in that same lane, but now starting to think about it, which is kind of fun. It's a new type of research lens to look at it through, but through consumer research. And so if we say, and you mentioned this earlier, Thea, if we are user-centered, if we are teacher-centered, and we think of teachers as consumers, at first it might feel uncomfortable to think of teachers as consumers, but as we really think about it, we're thinking about teachers and their lives and everything that surrounds them, their commitments at home. Do they have children? What is the time commitment? What are the cost commitments? And why they're choosing and selecting a teacher preparation program, what type, and maybe why they're opting to not select a teacher preparation program. So by us looking at it through this consumer lens, it's new, but hopefully will tell us and allow us to have data to help those preparation programs, those university partners, those district partners, on how they can better innovate their programs to make teacher preparation more accessible for our teachers, as you mentioned earlier.
Yeah, I think we're at a great moment of, apprenticeships, residencies, just the space for what quality can look like, I think is opening up, and research like this, I think will just help us really make sure we're attuned to supporting folks coming into the field. So I'm really excited about it too.
Yeah. Thea, you mentioned earlier Texas Tech research out of Circle, and I think Jacob Kirksey's done a phenomenal job at crystallizing in really quantitative terms the impact of teacher preparation or the quality of a teacher's prepared path. There's also attrition data that you mentioned from the Texas Education Agency, and there's the Charles Butt Foundation data. There is a ton of information out there when it comes to teachers in Texas, which is a really, really good thing. But for maybe those of us who are just like flipping through and trying to figure out like how do these puzzle pieces work together, or what should I be thinking about the teacher workforce on a comprehensive picture, you guys are in this work daily, right? You take all of these pieces together. What advice would you give, or like how are you two thinking about the way that the data should interact with each other, or maybe how LONESTAR3 could do a good job at trying to bring these puzzle pieces together? Just how do we make this maybe a more comprehensive picture?
Yeah, I think it's like having so much data is such a gift, but having so much data can be so much and so overwhelming. And how do you, so you mentioned it's like there's something on pre-service, there's something on in-service, there's something, and it's just like these little segments. But I think we are starting to be at a place where there's enough data to be telling stories about the pipeline and not just about these pieces, and thinking about how we string those together. Like, I don't feel like I have a great answer, but it's definitely something that we're thinking about, and I know others are thinking about. I think one way that we think about doing that is through storytelling, and how do we connect, like these are real people, each piece of research is about real people, and how do we bring some of those stories to the forefront so that it's not just data, but it's data with a face. And so I think that's something that we often think about. But yeah, I don't know that I have a good answer, but it is so much data, it's so incredible, starting to put it together. And I think we see it as we see more people kind of understand, I don't know that most people 5 years ago would know what a residency was, and now folks do. And I think the repetition and the bringing in of new data sources is really important.
Yeah, and I think an example to that is even us learning with the researchers, learning out of the research that is coming out of Texas Tech. It's shifting the way we talk about preparation and teacher certification. Instead of fully emphasizing and putting all our focus on certification, it's certification with high quality preparation and understanding there are multiple pathways to high quality preparation. And I think that shift in change of how we talk about teacher preparation has come out of these recent reports that we've mentioned. So I think the shift in language, the shift in how we approach the work is also really important.
No, I think what's exciting about this organization is thinking about how do we get these people together and talking so that even the researchers, the practitioners can start building those linkages together. I think it's really easy to do research in a silo, and having the opportunity to come together and talk about it is incredibly important.
Yeah, I don't think you have to ask anybody twice about that, right? There's a lot of desire to connect the dots in a little bit of a crisper way, right? I think we've all built some really impressive research tools along the way, and now bringing that together could add to the next frontier. I do just want to remind the audience that we do have a chat available for questions. So if you have those burning questions, please add them in, and we'll make sure that we have time for those at the end. But I want to shift back. I know that many of the LONESTAR3 community are researchers, and they really do want to provide evidence and insights on effective teacher preparation, and they want to see it put to good use, right? That's a theme that I've heard repeatedly from LONESTAR3 is we want research to lead to something, right? We want research to impact change. How could the broader research community, if you could wave a magic wand, how could they be of service to the Charles Butt Foundation as you guys are kind of in this moment of refinement and, like you said, maybe shifting toward teacher preparation or helping teachers understand, teacher candidates understand potential paths?
Yeah, I was just going to add, I think here with partnering with other researchers in the field would help us understand the different experiences in different regions of the state. We talked about the limitations of polling. So if we could engage with researchers more through regional efforts to really contextualize the data by region. I think also in the past, we've incorporated stakeholder feedback to help us modify or add new questions. And so we always welcome those conversations. We have a research team at the foundation who loves engaging in research conversations. And so we welcome that so that we can also learn. We don't also want to be in a silo. We read the reports, but it's even better to have those conversations so that it can inform our future work.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think the more research we get that comes in context, right? Like that is embedded in bright spots in districts and teacher preparation programs, that is, you know, formative and not always summative, but that is part of that feedback, that research practice partnership, part of that feedback loop with these institutions that are, you know, on the ground floor of supporting our students. I think the research has a really important role to play in bringing forth those bright spots and studying them, but also helping inform them and having this kind of virtuous cycle of getting better and better over time. And I think for us, for me, those are the kinds of research that I love to read, right? And that make me think like, oh, there's something here, like there's something happening, and also signal that everyone involved is in a learning stance, which I think is so important for us.
Yeah, there's something very formative. I like that word. We had a question come in about how the Charles Butt Foundation is thinking about supporting uncertified teachers. So I know we kind of touched on this a minute ago, but wonder if you can demystify that a little bit more, or is there something there? I just want to be responsive to this question specifically, knowing the number of uncertified teachers that we have in the state right now and what the research says. How is the foundation thinking about its support for those teachers specifically?
Yeah, I think we're really mostly thinking about how do we, it's so weird to say how do we get those folks prepared, because they're in it, right? Like that was kind of the dichotomy I was sharing earlier, but how do we and what do they need to be successful, right? Ideally, everyone who's in front of teachers would have had that rich support, mentorship, clinical practice. But how do we work with partners, with districts, with teacher preparation programs? How do we incentivize teacher preparation programs in districts, ESCs to work together to provide that kind of, unfortunately now it's on-the-job training, right? But in some ways that's also a beautiful thing, right? On-the-job training, where they can be really responsive to what those folks need in the classroom. And so I think that's something that we are in the process of exploring, of like, what is the best way to do that now that we've got these folks and we want to support them to be successful?
Yeah. A softball question, but wondering what made one of your favorite teachers so great?
Great
So
question.
like looking back when you were a kid in school, because I think so much of that that's what sticks with us, but there's an element of, you know, they clearly love the job, but they were also likely urging you to stretch. So does a teacher come to mind, or a competency that they offered?
Yeah.
I think now having been a teacher and now being where I stand, I actually think more about a team of teachers than I had in middle school. And the way it was so clear that whether it was math class, it was science class, it was social studies class, they were talking to each other. They knew what we were learning in the other classes. They were bringing in, you know, thoughts and ideas, and just the way that made me feel successful in all, like math was not my subject, right? But the way I still had room for success because I knew that they were working together. Maybe I couldn't solve the problem, but I could remember that thing that we did in English class and I could bring it back. And I now have such appreciation for how much behind the scenes work it took for that to be so seamless for us. And so I have a very clear picture of them in my mind and how they all took school culture as something that they were responsible for.
In middle school.
In middle school, I know, when we were a handful.
Yeah, what I love about that is the community probably within that teacher pod just as much as what they wanted to provide for their students, right? It's multi-tiered there in a really neat way.
Yeah.
Kendra, any teachers come to mind?
Yeah, I mentioned earlier as an immigrant English language learner here as a young child, 6-7-year-old in elementary school. The teacher that comes to mind is Miss Tweety, and that name is so fitting for her because she's just sweet and so kind. But something that she did as my English language learner teacher, as the teacher who would teach me basically English, and and spent time with her, she noticed the importance of bringing my family into the conversation. And so she was a teacher that really recognized that my parents also wanted to be part of my education. And so I remembered some of my interactions with her often included my family as well. And then she would also provide me materials such as books to take home. And so as a young child, you don't really notice the importance of that, but later on you realize, oh, all these books I have at home that are in English and Spanish so that my mom could read to me in English and Spanish came from this teacher. And then now in my professional role, looking at the polling, we have questions that ask teachers, do they notice the different barriers or needs of their students? And they do know that. And so to see that personal connection, to me, I think is just now kind of full circle. But yeah, that Miss Tweedy will always be forever in my heart for just bringing my family in to my learning, because they really wanted to be included. And just because they couldn't speak English did not mean that they didn't want to be included, but they just needed to be brought into the conversation.
Yeah, and I think both of you hinted at skills that were likely taught to them, or strategies that were taught to them, right? There was an intentional design for how the teacher engages with kids who may be nervous or uncomfortable in a new school climate, and how teachers work with other teachers on campus to ensure that all students are engaged in learning, and there's like the teacher handoff, right? Like much like a parent handoff, right? Like I gotta tap out for a moment, who's gonna come in? And I think all of that just speaks again to this value of preparation and this value of making sure that teachers understand what they're getting into sounds bad, right? But like the opportunity in front of them, because they are such an incredibly influential factor, and that's what draws so many teachers to the classroom, right? So how do you pour gasoline on that fire in a productive way for students? We are getting near the end of our questions. I wonder if there's anything you guys would like to add. I know we've kind of talked a lot about the poll and methodology and the findings, but as you think about ending the interview today, going back to your day job, what are you wanting to share with the LONESTAR3 community?
Yeah, I mean, as mentioned earlier, we want to engage with conversations with multiple researchers, whether it's foundations, institutions, researchers, just in general. We want to be more in partnership and conversation so that we can influence and only help us improve our research, as well as us learn from others. Like I mentioned earlier, for us to shift the way that we look at preparation, certification, underprepared, understanding the experiences of teachers, classroom experience, all of that to us, we've learned within the past few months because of all the great work that has been put out recently. And so we want to be more in partnership with individuals as well. Also, our polls are all online, so 5 years of data are all online. You can download the data and access the full report. You can also request a presentation. Our Learning and Impact team would love to come present our findings of either the teacher poll and or our Texas education poll, so you can understand kind of this wide understanding of perspectives of Texans and teachers. So we would love to come to any audience to present that data. And then within the same kind of online way to request a presentation, you can also request our physical polls. And they're beautifully designed because of our storytelling and our marketing team. And we can mail how many ever you request. So we can mail out several. I know our team would love to mail those report outs to individuals who request them.
Thanks.
Yeah, I would piggyback on all of that and just add, I think we're really excited to help think about how we put all this data together into narrative, and think about how we tell this story to a broader audience, as you said, folks for whom this is really important because they may have kids in schools, or they may not, right? And they just believe that having an educated citizenry is important. But how do we start bringing all of these pieces together? And I think it starts with getting more involved with groups like LONESTAR3, where we're all talking together and starting to build some of those themes out to share with the broader public.
Yeah, well, we did have one final question come in, which I don't know that we'll frame as a question, but there's a lot of desire to really dig into the rural aspect of Texas, right? Because so much of our state is rural, Preparation looks different in rural Texas. Teaching looks different in rural Texas. Leader and teacher support, it all looks different. And so I know that there are options and partnership opportunities if that becomes an avenue where the Butt Foundation can dig in a little deeper. Happy to connect you with folks offline. But it's a critical area, right? And if it doesn't work for rural Texas, then we need to go back to the drawing board and figure out how to make it work. Well, Lone Star P3 community, if you will join me in thanking our guests today. Lone Star P3 Live will return in the fall. On September 25th, we will host Texas Workforce Commissioner Chairman Brian Daniel to talk about the Texas labor market and the education and training opportunities available to help Texans participate in our economy. So we will see you next time. Thank you so much for joining us.